An ancient artifact has been interpreted, deciphered, and decoded. The artifact contains multi-layered messages of a metaphysical, spiritual, and technical nature. This artifact of great antiquity reads like a book in stone, a book that can be equated to a technical or engineering manual in stone. Having interpreted, deciphered, and decoded this particular artifact, I am curious as to whether or not certain individuals can bring unique perspective to this endeavor and contribute to a broader discussion. As it relates to part 6 of this video series, it was back in the year 2018 when I happened to come across a video posted by Jimmy Corsetti entitled Incredible Electromagnetic Properties of the Great Pyramid of Giza, Egypt. In the video, Jimmy references several news articles reporting on a study conducted at the Great Pyramid of Giza. The results of the study concluded that the Great Pyramid has the ability to concentrate and focus electromagnetic energy throughout its internal structure. Jimmy goes on to talk about mounting evidence, which points to the fact that the Great Pyramid of Giza is not a tomb built for the pharaohs, but rather it appears to be a technological structure whose original purpose is not very well understood and may very well have been a structure that was originally established as a geo-power plant for the purpose of generating power. Let's take a brief look at the video clip.
The evidence is overwhelming that what we were taught in school about ancient human civilization, particularly about the ancient Egyptians, is far from accurate. Specifically that our true history was once far older and advanced than we ever thought possible. And the most recent scientific evidence further demonstrates that the Great Pyramid of Giza, Egypt, was not a tomb built for the pharaohs, but is literally a massive technological structure that is beyond our current understanding. You may have seen the news articles that reported on a recent study published in the Journal of Applied Physics, which was conducted by researchers and physicists from Germany and Russia, which provided scientific data based on calculations which showed that the Great Pyramid can concentrate electromagnetic energy inside of its internal chambers as well as under its base and inside the subterranean chamber. Now, the significance of this discovery cannot be overstated because we now have scientific data which supports the theory that the Great Pyramid of Giza was in fact a technological structure of some kind. And I discussed this in detail last year in a video I made where I combined Nikola Tesla's concept for harnessing wireless energy out of the earth, and I make the case that the Great Pyramid may have been a structure for generating power, a theory that has been proposed for decades by researchers such as Christopher Dunn and others. But with the recent discovery involving the Great Pyramid of Giza's ability to concentrate and focus energy, we have to start asking serious questions as to what this massive and mysterious structure's purpose actually was.
During the course of watching Jimmy's video back in 2018, I was struck by the radio wave images that showed the concentration of electromagnetic energy within the Great Pyramid. What had immediately come to my mind at that time was that a year prior in 2017, I had been working to develop and apply several concepts in part 6 of this video series. As I continued watching his video, I thought it coincidental that during the process of deciphering this petroglyph in 2017, I had created a structure similar to the formation of radio wave images that were being shown in Jimmy's video. When looking at the column of concentrated energy that appears within each of the radio images, the electromagnetic energy appears to be uniform and somewhat constrained. In other words, there doesn't seem to be the random or broad scattering of energy within or throughout the Great Pyramid, but rather it would appear that the organized formation of focused energy seems to be constrained by the underlying architecture of a construct that cannot be seen with the naked eye. Now, if this in fact is the case, then we are left with the question as to the material composition of such a structure. As it relates to the structure in question, there came another instance where I happened upon a video by Graham Hancock entitled Ancient Civilizations, where he describes in detail the construction of the King's Chamber located within the Great Pyramid of Giza.
At the top of the Grand Gallery, you have an entrance to the King's Chamber. This is the King's Chamber here. And above the King's Chamber, not known until the early 19th century, are 5 more chambers. And getting into those chambers is really fun. I'll come to that in a moment. But let's first of all go into the King's Chamber. And this is what the King's Chamber looks like. Those are those shafts again. This is the northern shaft, the southern shaft's on this side. One pointing to Orion's belt, and the other again pointing to one of the circumpolar stars. It's a beautiful geometric room. It's made of granite blocks. The Great Pyramid is a limestone monument. These granite blocks were brought about 500 miles from Aswan. They were lifted to a height of hundreds of feet above the ground and put into position in this extraordinary chamber in the heart of the pyramid. There is a sarcophagus in it. I and my colleagues believe that this is not a sarcophagus that ever contained the body of the pharaoh Khufu, or of any pharaoh. We think that it was involved in some kind of process, some kind of initiation. I'm going to talk about that a little bit. But because there is a sarcophagus in it, immediately the assumption has been made that this must have been the burial chamber of Khufu. Let's look at this setup again here. The King's Chamber and the so-called relieving chambers up above it, rather similar to the Jed pillar, the symbolic backbone of Osiris, which is a symbol of resurrection and rebirth in the ancient Egyptian religion. It seems that they were creating a symbol of resurrection, of rebirth within the Great Pyramid. To get into those rooms, here's what you do. You put a ladder 30 feet high up against this wall, and you lean it up against that side there, and there's a little hole just a bit wider than me, which fortunately a rope now hangs out of, and you grab hold of that rope, haul your body into it, pull yourself through, and then you get into a narrow tunnel, and that leads you into the first and eventually into all 5 of these chambers. And I'll just take you to the top chamber. That's that one up there. And again, these extraordinary, huge blocks of stone. These are in the range of 100 tons each, which form the floor of this chamber. And indeed, all the other chambers, again, have these gigantic blocks of stone, which are almost impossible to move, really.
What I find interesting about this particular video is Graham's reference to the 5 relieving chambers that are located above the construct of the King's Chamber, and their symbolic reference to both the Jed pillar and the backbone of Osiris. When I think about the similarities between the radio wave images, the construction of the King's Chamber, and the structure that emerged during the deciphering and decoding of this petroglyph, I am curious as to whether or not the overall interpretation of the encoded messages contained within this stone tablet can provide additional information as to the function, operation, and purpose of the Great Pyramid of Giza. With that said, I invite viewers to watch part 6 of this multi-part video series in order to better appreciate the correlation between the radio wave images, the 5 relieving chambers located above the construct of the King's Chamber, and the animations of illustration that have been interpreted from within this petroglyph. For interpretations related to the history of the Jed pillar and its relationship to the god Osiris, King of Egypt, I invite viewers to watch part 1 of this video series. As it relates to viewing each successive part of this video presentation, viewers will ultimately come to learn that the hidden messages contained within this petroglyph can be viewed and understood from many different perspectives. In my efforts to decode the information presented in part 6 of this video series, there came a point during the process of interpretation where I was moved to view this ancient artifact from both biological and scientific perspectives. In so doing, I was quite surprised to see the emergence of a DNA strand from within the 5-level structure of animated illustration that I had created. I was even more surprised to learn that the structure of DNA and other recent discoveries found within the Great Pyramid was the subject of discussion between Robert Grant and Alex Ferrari during a Next Level Soul podcast. Let's listen to Robert Grant in the following clip, where he discusses his recent findings after making connections between the images that appear within Leonardo da Vinci's painting of the Last Supper and similar images that were discovered within the King's Chamber of the Great Pyramid.
The entire Last Supper painting is a map of the King's Chamber of the Great Pyramid. Here's the DNA.
Yeah, I could see the movement on it. I could see the arcs of it. I could very easily. I mean, look, it helps that there's a pattern at the top. So just by matching it, you just look and you go, there it is. Yeah, there it is. Absolutely.
But you can even see the nucleotide pairs and the way they're twisting in perspective drawing. That's like impossibly difficult to do.
As it relates to the strand of DNA that emerged during the process of decoding this petroglyph, I am left with the impression that additional information related to human biology has yet to be discovered. In a related video entitled "The Code of Life Openly Hidden Between the Lines of Ancient Text," let's listen to Greg Braden give a brief overview about an ancient message encoded within our DNA.
There is a message in our DNA. It exists. It's been revealed, it's been read, it's been translated, and by following the instructions left to us in some of our most ancient and cherished traditions, we can now literally read the code of life as the letters of ancient alphabets. And when we do so, our genetic code becomes words, and the words become sentences. Although you may have always sensed that we're here on purpose, and that whoever, whatever is responsible for our being here may have left something hidden for us deep in the mystery of our lives long ago.
From within this petroglyph, it is the configuration of the 5-level structure and the DNA strand combined that appears to be conveying a timeless message. It makes one wonder how such a message could have been encoded in this way in the first place. To that end, let's listen to Billy Carson in an interview with Danny Jones, where he talks about an experiment where information and data was written, downloaded, and stored within human DNA.
They found out in the laboratory, Professor George Church, he did an experiment with DNA. He said, okay, let's see if DNA can store information, right? So he was able to take one of his ebooks, and he actually was able to convert the digital zeros and ones into A's, T's, and G's and download it onto DNA in a volume. And he said, man, it worked. I got my book onto the DNA. Let's see if I can replicate it. He replicated his book 80 billion times on 1 gram of DNA. One drop.
80 billion times.
80 billion times. And then what did he do? He said, okay, let's see if we can get it back. So then he converted the A's, T's, and G's back into zeros and ones and uploaded it back to the server. So he knew now that DNA can send and receive information in a volume. And so they said, wait a minute, this is incredible. So now they found out that one human body can store over 13.5 billion years of data just in your DNA. The secret to unmasking this entire universe is in each one of our bodies right now. We just have to tap into it. All the data is in there.
Now, what really got my attention was a portion of another interview where Billy Carson and David Ferrugio of the Dead Talks podcast discuss information with regard to the genetic modification of humans by the Anunnaki. According to Billy, it was during this process of genetic modification that Enki was to have hidden a specific type of genetic code within the human DNA.
There's one thing you just triggered in my head, because it kind of what I was just saying about they don't want us to know this. I remember listening to you saying something, maybe it was the Anunnaki, that when there was something in their DNA that we were restricted at certain levels of growth or our abilities. I'm saying that in a very silly way, but you know.
Well, they set it up, if you read the Epic of Atrahasis and the Enuma Elish and the 7 Tablets of Creation, similar creation stories, they talk about the fact that they took the existing being on this planet, which would be us, our cousins. They weren't Homo sapiens sapien yet, and they genetically modified them. When Enki did it, he had love for humans, For whatever reason, it's not really truly clear why he fell in love with humans so much. His brother was against that. His brother was Enlil, also known as Yahweh in the modern day Bible. But Enki hid a little extra code in there. So his job was a mission where he was given the task of unplugging a lot of our DNA, genetically tinkering with us, shrinking our pineal gland, getting us to not tap into our higher selves and see them as the gods so that we would do the work for them. So the best slave is a slave that doesn't know it's a slave. If we're laboring for you because we think we're honoring the gods, that's what it was really going. That's what really going on.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah, right. It keeps playing over and over again. But he hid a little code in there. And in the myth of Adapa, another ancient text, it talks about the fact that they discovered, unbeknownst to Enlil, and he was very pissed off about this, that mankind, Adamu or Adam, us Adapa, we had encoded in our body the mysteries and the secrets of the universe. And a little something, a time capsule genetically was put into us that when we reach a certain level of consciousness, it would unlock itself. And we would see this incredible growth and this incredible a path for mankind going in the right direction, seeking the light and growing beyond even our wildest dreams. And that we, even ourselves, we can achieve higher levels than even the Anunnaki had achieved. And so that's in a text called the Myth of Adapa. And that the wisdom of the entire universe is inside of our bodies.
Referring to an ancient text known as the Myth of Adapa, Billy states that the Anunnaki discovered that the mysteries and the secrets of the universe were encoded within the human body of the Adapa or the Adamu. He goes on to mention that a time capsule had been genetically placed within the human body of the Adapa, so that when mankind collectively reaches a certain level of consciousness, the time capsule would unlock itself and lead humanity under higher states of existence. As it pertains to the reference of a time capsule, what I find most interesting is that the 5-level structure that emerges from within the interpretation of this petroglyph also presents itself as a time capsule. Next up, we'll take a look at a video entitled "What They Found Underground Can Never Be Revealed," where Praveen Mohan visits the town of Adalaj in India and takes viewers on a tour of the Adalaj stepwell. When I happened upon this particular video, what I immediately noticed was the shape of the temple structure. In addition to the surface level construction and configuration of the temple, there were 2 other features about the structure that I found most interesting. The first feature being the number of inverted levels that define the structure of the temple, and the second feature being the existence of 2 separate wells. Let's take a look.
Hey guys, today we are going to look at a very mysterious structure in a small town called Adalaj. In the middle of the roads, houses and trees, what is that strange lingam-shaped structure? Is this a secret government organization or an underground bunker? No. This is a historic structure known as Adalaj Ni Vav, almost perfectly aligned along the north-south axis. Its design is totally unique. It does not have an entrance on the north side at all, and no entryways in the center of the structure as well. But on this side, it has 3 entrances with steps in 3 directions, right next to one another. Why was such a unique architecture built many centuries ago? What are these 3 octagonal structures on top? Now, let's get on the ground and try to get a closer view. This is a very surprising structure because nothing is visible from the ground level. Usually, I show you structures starting from ground level and going up. In this one, we start from the ground level and we are going to go down. Yes, this is an underground structure, but you know how many levels, how many floors go underground? It goes 5 stories below. It has 5 different levels. What do experts say about the structure? Experts call this the Adalige step well, and it was designed with 2 separate wells to provide water to the public. A giant structure with so many levels and carvings just to provide water. But there's an even more weird claim. Wikipedia calls this an Indo-Islamic structure, meaning that the structure was built by both Hindus and Muslims. How is this possible? We have come more than 75 feet deep and we have reached the bottommost level of the structure, and you can see this circular well. It looks remarkably simple, seems to be about 12 feet in diameter and just 30 feet deep. There are steps radiating on all 4 sides to help people access water from all sides. Is this well really the primary purpose of building this vast 5-storied underground structure? As you can see, there seems to be nothing else here. So let's go back up and look at the other details. No, wait. What about the second well? I told you there are 2 wells here, right? Where is the second well? Let's go past this first well and see if we can find it. After we go past the first well, there is another structure. And you can see a narrow entrance here. It is just 2 feet wide. It is so narrow that only one person can go through. And here we can see the secret second well. It is smaller than the first well and it's also less deep. If you look carefully into the well, you can see the bottom. It is probably less than 15 feet deep. Why would anyone build 2 separate wells right next to one another? I mean, they're for the same purpose, to draw water, right? Today, imagine you're building a house. Would you dig 2 separate wells or put 2 bore wells right next to each other? This would be like putting 2 separate entrances in front of your house. Nobody does it because there should be no use for this. But the original builders must have had a valid purpose for this, and we cannot understand what it is. Why is this well hidden from public view? And see here, a very fascinating carving. 2 kissing fish. What do they mean? I have repeatedly shown you carvings like this. They indicate the presence of groundwater underneath, and here we see it directly in the walls of the well. And look at the walls. You can see the shallow rectangular chambers. 3 chambers specifically. Inside these chambers, you can find carvings of Hindu gods. And each chamber would be visible from one floor. Why did they put these carvings and chambers in this wall? What is the real reason for building such a fantastic 5-storied structure? As we come out of the second well, you see this area. Between these 2 wells, it is completely covered. Look carefully. Do you see anything strange? Now, from this side of the first well, look at the architecture carefully. There are no dome-shaped arches. This looks like a typical Hindu architecture. They put large pillars on the sides and had very wide rectangular passages. And notice the pillars. The pillars are not made of bricks. They're not plastered. They're made of giant sandstone blocks. But now, let's go to the opposite side of the same well and look at the other side. This is shocking because it is a completely different architecture. These are Islamic doorways with those typical curves and arches. they're not made of giant stone blocks. They're all made of bricks and they're covered with plaster. This is a typical Muslim construction that you see in a mosque. So on one side you see a Hindu architecture and on the other side we see a Muslim architecture. Who really built the structure? Hindus or Muslims?
In summary, Adalaj Nidvalv is the name of an Indo-Islamic lingam-shaped temple whose structure is also referred to as the Adalaj Stepwell. This particular temple features 3 entrances located at its southern end, which lead into an underground structure. Commonly, most temples are accessed by entering into the structure from the ground level, where one ascends upon each of the interior levels of the temple in an upward fashion. However, the Adalaj Nidvalv temple is unique in that its structure is accessed by entering in from the ground level and then descending into each of the interior levels of the temple in a downward fashion. Similar to an inverted pyramid, the interior temple of the Adalaj Stepwell descends 5 stories below ground. Having said that, let's listen to a video clip where Matt LaCroix describes the Hermetic concepts of as above, so below, and how these concepts apply to the construction of ancient temples and pyramids, which are symbolic of the inner temple of man.
We see Hermetic concepts designed into that box as up above, above, below, the Hermetic concept of as above, so below. And it shows the triptych doorways as being a step pyramid with the levels and then an inverted one below.
As we go back to the Adalaj Stepwell, we can descend 75 feet below ground unto the lowest level of the temple, where 2 separate stepwells have been designed in their construction to provide water to the public. As it relates to symbolism, what is interesting to note here is that the first stepwell is bordered by a series of steps in the shape of a square that surround and descend unto the circular well of water below. Additional symbolism can be found by viewing the first stepwell from the Muslim side, where one can see the Hindu architecture of 2 sandstone pillars. When looking at the construction of these pillars, one is reminded of esoteric teachings related to the obelisk pillars found in Egypt, the pillar of the sun and the pillar of the moon, as well as the pillars of Jachin and Boaz. When viewing the first stepwell from the opposite position on the Hindu side, one can see the esoteric symbolism in the Muslim architecture for the triptych configuration of Islamic doorways. As a matter of fact, I am reminded of what Matthew LaCroix, in an interview with Alex Ferrari, had to say about the spiritual meaning of triptych doorways.
This triptych 3 is based on this concept that we exist as a totality of 3 aspects. Now, you saw religion take that and then turn it on its head with the Father, the Son, the Holy Ghost. So they took that and they woven it around as something different. But ancient civilizations didn't talk about it like that. They referred it to as a triptych doorway all around the world. Whether you go from the Mayan sites down through the Aztec sites like Chichen Itza and Teotihuacan, or you want to go down right into South America, all the way throughout the world, what we find is that this triptych 3 doorway, like for instance, like also, I just want to mention, it's also in Cambodia, and it's throughout Southeast Asia, in Egypt, and it's in Turkey as in these sites. This triptych doorway, now what does it really mean? Well, it's this aspect that we have these 3 parts to us, these 3 fundamental parts, and if we can balance them all, we can reach these higher states of consciousness. And they describe them, and the Hindus described them, and cultures around the world describe them. Hermeticism described it as this energy of like the masculine, the feminine energy, right? Or the left and right brain. And then this aspect of this central point of the two combining to create this third aspect of our divinity. And what it means is they're trying to show us these doorways. They're showing this left and right doorway, that if those are balanced in harmony, then there's this third doorway that unlocks within us through this kundalini energy off our spine and this aspect of energy that we almost emerge and blossom and flower. And what they use to describe that is the ancient symbol of the flowering lily. Okay. And that flowering lily became shown in French symbols later on and others. And it was this idea that if we follow certain teachings, we can flower into this incredibly divine and higher being.
At this time, I would like to summarize the information that I have presented thus far so that viewers can understand the overall point that I am trying to make here. The ultimate purpose for my having gathered and collected information from various sources is for the purpose of determining whether or not the underworld of the Duat might exist as a multi-level structure beneath the Bull Mountain of Mount Taurus and the Rostau Plateau in Egypt. Because according to the interpretation of hidden messages that have been encoded within this petroglyph, it would appear that an ancient structure of great antiquity has yet to be discovered, and that this structure may have some relationship to the Bull Mountain of Mount Taurus. Let's go back to Billy Carson in his interview with David Ferrugio, where he talks about a hidden underground in Egypt.
And these halls of dimensions were deep underground in some cases. The one he talked about was underneath the Great Pyramid. Now, I've been down this subterranean shaft, which goes down 65 meters. I think maybe less than 4,000 people have ever been down this shaft in history of Egypt. Since they started, letting people come to the pyramid, and then another 30 meters down beneath that. And there's more to go beneath even that.
There's more?
Oh, there's more.
And you know what's down there?
Oh, yeah. No, all that's down there is you have chambers. They discovered them through a special type of a scan, a muon scan. They discovered these huge halls underground, underneath the Great Pyramid that extend out underneath Giza a mile. And all of them appear to be potentially empty. They won't tell us what was there or what wasn't there. But these halls of Amenti that were written 36,000 years ago by Thoth, they actually exist right now today.
So when you said they won't tell you what was there, is there what's going on there?
In other words, they won't give us an idea if they went down there and found something and took it away, or is it still there? They won't give us that data, but they have confirmed the halls are actually there.
What are they hiding, you think? It's known, though. It is.
Yeah.
Some people know what's going on.
Yeah, there's some people know. Yeah.
So are you going to get to that?
Zahi Hawass and many others. It's called the Halls of Amenti, where they have the rejuvenation chambers.
As I stated previously, similar to the 5 relieving chambers found above the King's Chamber within the Great Pyramid, the emergence of a structure comprised of 5 separate housings was indicated during the process of deciphering and decoding this stone tablet. Additionally, there is the configuration of an inverted triangle within the first housing of this 5-level structure. As it relates to the configuration of the Adalaj stepwell in India, what we've learned is that its lingam-shaped temple is similar in shape to both the 5 relieving chambers found above the King's Chamber within the Great Pyramid and the 5-level structure that emerged during the process of interpreting this petroglyph. In the Hindu tradition, the lingam is representative of the Hindu deity Shiva, who is known for their role in creation and destruction. The phallic shape of the lingam is symbolic of divine generative energy and represents the cosmic balance of male and female energies that are essential for the eternal process of creation and regeneration. This union of masculine and feminine energies represents the merging of the microcosm and the macrocosm and the balance of energies that recreate all of existence. What is interesting to note here is that there are several instances throughout this multi-part video series where I have created animated illustrations of concepts that are similar to the description of the Shiva Lingam. I invite viewers to watch The Marriage of Divine Union between the god Osiris, King of Egypt, and the goddess Isis, Queen of Egypt, in part 1 of this video series, as well as the sneak previews for part 7 through part 10 in order to appreciate and understand these concepts and how they apply to the existence of an ancient structure that has yet to be found. With that said, let's get back to highlighting certain features about the configuration of the Adelage stepwell. Number 1, the stepwell was designed as an inverted temple whose structure is comprised of 5 separate levels that descend underground. Although the Adelage Nidval Temple in India and the Great Pyramid of Giza in Egypt do not appear to have any obvious connection, I am still curious as to whether or not a multi-level structure or 5-storied structure similar to the Adelage stepwell might be located below the base of the Great Pyramid and beneath the Giza Plateau, based upon the focused concentration of electromagnetic energy as seen within the radio wave images, the configuration of the 5 relieving chambers located above the King's Chamber, and the configuration of the 5-level structure that emerged from within the petroglyph. Number 2, the southern entrance of the Adelage stepwell features 3 sets of stairs that descend into the lower levels of the structure. As the 3 sets of stairs represent the eastern, western, and southern entrances into the temple, their configuration of construction results in the pattern of an inverted triangle at the southern entrance of the stepwell. This pattern of an inverted triangle located at the furthest end of the structure is similar to the inverted triangle that is configured within the first housing of the 5-level structure that emerged from within the petroglyph. Number 3, similar to the presence of 2 separate wells that are located within the Adelage Nidval Temple, it is in part 3 of this video series where viewers will learn about the inner core of a construct that can also be viewed as a well. And finally, when we look at the petroglyph from biological and scientific perspectives, we have come to learn that a strand of DNA emerges from within the 5-level structure and that their combined configuration ultimately results in a timeless message. As Praveen Mohan has a background in engineering, and both Billy Carson and Robert Grant have backgrounds in physics, I wonder if between the 3 of them, they might find clues throughout this multi-part presentation and finally solve the riddle of the ages-old mystery once and for all. On a final note, and as it relates to the emergence of a 5-level structure in part 6 of this video series, it is the title of Graham Hancock's best-selling book, Magicians of the Gods, which foretells of an unexpected revelation related to the magicians who are the Magi and the Ascended Masters of Magic. To learn more about the DNA time capsule and its hidden mystery within the inner temple of man, I invite viewers to watch Part 6 of Ancient Messages in Stone, Decoding the Assyrian Tree of Life. In Part 6 of this video series, we will begin by learning about concepts related to the law of time. As we build upon these concepts and apply the divine principles of numerology within the field, what will ultimately be revealed is the underlying structure of time itself in its foundation for the rhythm of life. Hello everyone, and welcome to Part 6 of Ancient Messages in Stone, Decoding the Assyrian Tree of Life. Here in Part 6, we'll focus on concepts related to the law of time, the structure and configuration of time, the divine principles of numerology, and how these concepts apply to the field. Previously in Part 5, Subpart 3, we applied the divine principles of numerology in the creation of data tables resulting from the micro and minor division of the fields for both the field of the plane and the field of the sphere. We'll begin by bringing data tables 1 and 2 forward for a brief review of what we previously accomplished. So before us, we have the orbital plane as it is laid forth upon the vertical plane of scale. In the micro and minor division for the field of the plane, we divided the field into 6 equal sections. In applying the divine principles of numerology, we proceeded to sequentially assign a number to each section as we scaled the plane, beginning with the number 1 and ending with the number 6. This series of numbers is referred to as the housing number. Next, we determine the total number of orbital spheres, series of numbers, and/or elements contained within each housing and attributed that number to each section as we scaled the plane. This series of numbers is simply referred to as the number of spheres. Next, we combine the housing number for each section with the number of orbital spheres, series of numbers, and/or elements contained within each housing as we scaled the plane. This series of numbers that have been combined is referred to as the station number or the station of housing. And finally, as we scaled the plane once again, we reduced each station number to its lowest number by adding the numbers together in order to arrive at the scale number for each housing, station, or station of housing. Similarly, in the micro and minor division for the field of the sphere, we divided the field into 4 equal sections. In applying the divine principles of numerology, we sequentially assigned a number to each section as we scaled the sphere, beginning with the number 1 and ending with the number 4. This series of numbers is referred to as the quadrant number. Next, we determined the total number of orbital spheres contained within each quadrant and attributed that number to each section as we scaled the sphere. This series of numbers is simply referred to as the number of spheres. Next, we combine the quadrant number for each section with the total number of orbital spheres contained within each quadrant as we scaled the sphere. This series of numbers that have been combined is referred to as the station number. And finally, as we scaled the sphere once again, we reduced each station number to its lowest number by adding the numbers together in order to arrive at the scale number for each quadrant. So before us, what we have is a side-by-side comparison of the orbital plane and the orbital sphere as they are configured upon the tree of life within the field. When we apply the information from data tables 1 and 2, we can see that the micro and minor division for the field of the plane is similar to what we accomplished in the micro and minor division for the field of the sphere. However, there exist 2 minor differences between them. The first difference lay in the label of description for the housing column in the vertical plane and the label of description for the quadrant in the circular plane. The housing and the quadrant are equivalent to one another in their respective planes. However, as it relates to the methods for determining the number of spheres, the station number, and the scale number for each housing or quadrant, these methods remain the same and apply to both fields. The second difference lay in the fact that the vertical plane features 2 additional housings that are not found within the circular plane. As such, what is similar between both the plane and the sphere is that the process of micro and minor division within both fields was specifically accomplished on a scale based upon the numbers 1 through 12. Now that we have completed our side-by-side comparison of field division, we will now go to data table 3 for the field of the plane and apply the divine principles of numerology from another perspective. As we approach the field, our only focus will be on those housings that contain orbital spheres. Upon scaling the plane, we will add together the numbers associated with each of the 3 spheres that are contained within each of the housings. So beginning with housing number 1, we can add the numbers 1 plus 2 plus 3 together and arrive at the total sum of 6. In order to reduce the number 6 to its lowest number, we can add together 6 plus 0 and arrive at the total sum of 6. As we scale to housing number 2, we can add the numbers 4 plus 5 plus 6 together and arrive at the total sum of 15. We can further reduce the number 15 to its lowest number by adding together 1 plus 5 and arrive at the total sum of 6. As we scale to housing number 3, we can add the numbers 7 plus 8 plus 9 together and arrive at the total sum of 24. We can further reduce the number 24 to its lowest number by adding together 2 plus 4 and arrive at the total sum of 6. And finally, as we scale to housing number 4, we can add the numbers 10 plus 11 plus 12 together and arrive at the total sum of 33. We can further reduce the number 33 to its lowest number by adding together 3 plus 3 and arrive at the total sum of 6. Similarly, in data table 4, we can apply the divine principles of numerology to the field of the sphere and add together the numbers associated with each of the 3 spheres that are contained within each of its quadrants. However, as we scale its circular plane, we will do so from the perspective of time as if the sphere were a clock. So beginning with quadrant number 1, we can add 1 o'clock plus 2 o'clock plus 3 o'clock together and arrive at the total sum of 6. We can reduce the number 6 to its lowest number by adding together 6 plus 0 and arrive at the total sum of 6. As we scale to quadrant number 2, we can add 4 o'clock plus 5 o'clock plus 6 o'clock together and arrive at the total sum of 15. We can further reduce the number 15 to its lowest number by adding together 1 plus 5 and arrive at the total sum of 6. As we scale to quadrant number 3, we can add the numbers 7 o'clock plus 8 o'clock plus 9 o'clock together and arrive at the total sum of 24. We can further reduce the number 24 to its lowest number by adding together 2 plus 4 and arrive at the total sum of 6. And finally, as we scale to quadrant number 4, we can add the numbers 10 o'clock plus 11 o'clock plus 12 o'clock together and arrive at the total sum of 33. We can further reduce the number 33 to its lowest number by adding together 3 plus 3 and arrive at the total sum of 6. As we have applied the divine principles of numerology in data tables 3 and 4, we will now do a side-by-side comparison of micro and minor division for the field of the plane and the field of the sphere. So once again, we have before us a side-by-side comparison of the orbital plane and the orbital sphere as they are configured upon the tree of life within the field. When we apply the information from data tables 3 and 4, we can see that the application of the divine principles of numerology within the field of the plane and the field of the sphere produces the same result. In other words, when we added together the numbers associated with each individual sphere as they are contained within each housing or quadrant, we were able to reduce the sum totals to their lowest numbers, which resulted in the number 6. Now that we have completed our side-by-side comparison of field division from a numerological perspective, we will review a chart that summarizes the information we created in data tables 1 through 4. Looking at the chart before us, labels for the vertical plane of scale and housings 1 through 4 are populated in the first row. In the second row, labels for the circular plane of scale in quadrants 1 through 4 are populated in the second row. The numbers associated with each individual sphere, as they are contained within each housing or quadrant, are populated within the third row. The sum total for their series of numbers appears within the total column. For the fourth row, labeled numerology 1, the sum total of the spheres are added together for each housing or quadrant, reducing each sum to its lowest number. In so doing, the lowest number arrived at for each housing or quadrant is equal to the number 6. Each of the sum totals for numerology 1 in the fourth row are then populated below on the fifth row labeled numerology 2. When each of these numbers are added together, it results in the sum total of 24. The sum total of 24 is then further reduced to its lowest number by adding 2 plus 4, which results in the sum of 6. Just below the chart is information related to the field of the orbital plane. Our first reference is that of the vertical plane of scale, which can be viewed from the perspective of field division as it relates to the field of the plane. As it relates to the orbital plane of the musical spheres, the plane can also be viewed from a musical perspective. From the perspective of field division, we have further referenced the 6 vertical housings that result from the macro and major divisions of the field of the plane. Our second reference is that of the circular plane of scale, which can be viewed from the perspective of field division as it relates to the field of the sphere. As it relates to the orbital plane for the wheel of life, the plane can also be viewed from the perspective of time. From the perspective of divine architecture, we have further referenced the 6 concentric circles that comprise the base foundation for the wheel of life. At this time, some may be wondering as to why each series of numbers contained within each housing or quadrant reduces to their lowest number of 6. Well, the number 6 appears as a persistent constant within the orbital field because 6 is the numerical expression of divine law related to time. That is to say, the cycles, the phases, and the measure of time. The law of time equal 6. Here in the second section of Part 6, we will begin with a brief review of concepts that we have learned thus far throughout this video presentation. By now, you should be familiar with the field of the whole, the all, and the oneness, and the fact that the tree of life is central to the field. That, within the field, we can define the 4 corners of the universe and establish the perimeter for the field of territorial boundary. It should be understood that the space or area within the perimeter is referred to as the field of incorporation. It is upon the central column of the trunk or stalk of the pole ground for the tree of life that we can lay forth the foundation for the vertical plane of scale. Beginning with the number 1, we can scale the tree of life and sequentially attribute a number at each tree branching interval. As the tree of life is central to the field, it presents as a unified or singular body. However, in recognizing the principle of mirror reflection, we can count the total number of floral blossoms that surround the tree to include the central floral bud. And in the tree branching of duality, we can divide the tree of life in half so that both the right and the left sides are a mirror reflection of one another, yet be able to retain its cohesion as a unified or singular body. At this point, we can further establish a connection between both the right and left sides of the tree of life by inserting an ascending scale of orbital frames at each tree branching interval. The resultant orbital encasement of assembly and design is referred to as the field of the plane of the orbital spheres, the orbital plane of the musical spheres, and other forms of reference depending upon the dimension of perspective from which the field or the tree of life within the field is being viewed. At this time, we will refer to the definition for the term encasement, related words, and their meaning. The term encasement is defined as the encapsulation of an enclosed structure. The first related word is the term case. The term case is defined as a container designed to hold or protect something. The second related word is the term encase. The term encase is defined as to close in a protective container, to enclose within a protective case or casing, to cover or enclose something completely. The third related word is the term encased. The term encased is defined as covered, enclosed or surrounded within a protective casing, enclosed in a protective covering. The fourth related word is the term encapsule. The term encapsule is defined as to enclose or be enclosed in or as if in a capsule. The fifth related word is the term encapsulate. The term encapsulate is defined as to completely cover or enclose something within, or as if to encapsulate. With that said, let us now recall what we accomplished in part 4 of this video series, where we divided the field of the plane, where in the microdivision of the field, we divided the plane into 6 minor areas or scales of division. In the creation of Data Table 1, we defined each section or minor area of scale by attributing a number to it. Beginning with the number 1, we attributed a number to each section in sequential order as we scaled the plane and ended with the number 6. In the orbital plane of division, this set or series of numbers is referred to as the housing number. Previously in Part 5, Subpart 2, we defined the meaning of the term housing. At this time, we will review once again the definition for the term housing. The term housing is defined as a rigid casing that encloses or protects. The supportive form of a frame that results in an encasement or is encapsulated. Let us now return to the field, where once again we'll read the definition for the term housing as we apply its meaning within the field. The term housing is defined as a rigid casing that encloses or protects. The supportive form of a frame that results in an encasement or is encapsulated. Having applied the definition for the term housing within the field, we will now review the definition for the term A-frame. The term A-frame is defined as any upright, rigid supporting frame in the form of a triangle, the upright letter A, or an inverted letter V. A triangular-shaped roof that slopes downward from a central ridge or peak. A building constructed principally of such a frame with a steeplechase-type roof resting atop its foundation. Let us now return to the field, where once again we'll read the definition for the term A-frame as we apply its meaning within the field. The term A-frame is defined as any upright, rigid supporting frame in the form of a triangle, the upright letter A, or an inverted letter V. A triangular-shaped roof that slopes downward from a central ridge or peak. A building constructed principally of such a frame, with a steeplechase-type roof resting atop its foundation. Having applied the definition for the term A-frame within the field, we will once again revisit the term encasement and related words as we apply their meaning within the field. The first related word is the term case. The term case is defined as a container designed to hold or protect something. The second related word is the term encase. The term encase is defined as to enclose in a protective container, to enclose within a protective case or casing, to cover or enclose something completely. The third related word is the term encased. The term encased is defined as covered, enclosed or surrounded within a protective casing, enclosed in a protective covering. The fourth related word is the term encapsule. The term encapsule is defined as to enclose or be enclosed in, or as if in a capsule. The fifth related word is the term encapsulate. The term encapsulate is defined as to completely cover or enclose something within, or as if to encapsulate. The term encasement is defined as the encapsulation of an enclosed structure. By example, what we have just demonstrated within the field is the animated definition for the word housing. This animated process of encasing or encapsulating the orbital plane of the spheres establishes the firm foundation of a vertical horizon, which gives form and structure to time itself. Ultimately, it is the encapsulated structure of the orbital plane that can be likened unto a time capsule. At this time, we will refer to the definitions for vertical, horizon, and time capsule. The term vertical is defined as the upstanding position of being straight up and down from top to bottom or from bottom to top. A line or direction rising straight upward toward a zenith. Being in a position or direction that is perpendicular to the plane of a horizon, relating to the crown of the head. The term horizon is defined as, at its furthest point, it is the distant line where the sky seems to meet the earth, land, or sea. The range or scope of a person's outlook, perception, knowledge, interest, education, understanding, or knowledge. To broaden or expand one's conscious awareness beyond a perceived point of zenith. The expansion of one's consciousness beyond the doors of perception and the perceived limitations of reality. The term time capsule is defined as a container filled with information collected in the present time for the purpose of being opened as a historical message in a future time. In summary, the term vertical horizon can be defined as moving upward in time toward a perceived outcome, goal, or objective. As it relates to the encasement of the orbital plane, each case configured in their stacking, one atop the other, results in a series of housings that is referred to as the building blocks of creation. Let us now refer to the definition for the building blocks of creation and their meaning. The building blocks of creation is defined as the elements of simple organic compounds such as carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, hydrogen, and sulfur, who in their combination are comprised of atoms and the molecular structures of subatomic particles such as protons, electrons, neutrons, which form the basis of matter. Earth, wind, water, fire, and the ether are the 5 elements of nature that are an expression of these structures. Let us now return to the field, where we will read once again the definition for the building blocks of creation as we apply the animation of its meaning within the field. The building blocks of creation is defined as the elements of simple organic compounds such as carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, hydrogen, and sulfur, who in their combination are comprised of atoms and the molecular structures of subatomic particles such as protons, electrons, neutrons, which form the basis of matter. Earth, wind, water, fire, and the ether are the 5 elements of nature that are an expression of these structures. With that said, atoms are what form the basis of the quintessential building blocks. It is from a scientific perspective that the divine creator of all, who is God, uses the quintessential building blocks in the creation of matter in life. At this time, we will now refer to the definitions for the terms quint, quintessential, quintessence, and essence in order to understand their meanings and how they apply to the quintessential building blocks. The term quint is defined as referring to the 5th, the number 5, or 5 of something. The term quintessential is defined as of or relating to the most perfect embodiment of something, the most perfect or typical example of a quality or class. The term quintessence is defined as the 5th and highest element in ancient and medieval philosophy that permeates all nature and is the substance composing the celestial bodies, the essence of a thing in its purest form. The term essence is defined as the intrinsic nature of something or the basic quality of a substance that determines its character. The basic, real, and or invariable nature of a thing and its significant individual feature or features. The permanent element of existence or being. Let us once again return to the field, where we will read the definitions for quint, quintessential, quintessence, and essence as we apply the animation of their meanings within the field. The term quint is defined as referring to the 5th, the number 5, or 5 of something. The term quintessential is defined as of or relating to the most perfect embodiment of something, the most perfect or typical example of a quality or class. The term quintessence is defined as the 5th and highest element in ancient and medieval philosophy that permeates all nature and is the substance composing the celestial bodies, the essence of a thing in its purest form. The term essence is defined as the intrinsic nature of something or the basic quality of a substance that determines its character. The basic, real, and or invariable nature of a thing and its significant individual feature or features. The permanent element of existence or being. The quintessential building blocks are considered to be elemental, essential, fundamental, and foundational to the coexistence of life in all of its forms. Let us now refer to the definitions for the terms elemental, essential, fundamental, and foundational in order to understand their meanings and how they apply to the quintessential building blocks of life. The term elemental is defined as a primary or basic feature from which all other structures are compounded. The basic or essential constituent of something that is considered to be fundamental. The basic part of a whole, an example being the elemental root of a fundamental essence or primordial substance. The term essential is defined as the intrinsic, fundamental nature of something basic or inherent, a basic, indispensable, or necessary element belonging to the essence of a thing, something that is absolutely necessary or extremely important. The term fundamental is defined as an original or primary source which forms a necessary base or core of central importance, a central or primary rule or principle upon which something is based, the basic, underlying, or essential part of a foundation or basis. The term foundational is defined as an underlying basis or principle, forming or serving as a base of foundation, forming the base from which everything else develops. Let us now return to the field, where we will read the definitions for elemental, essential, fundamental, and foundational as we apply the animation of their meanings within the field. The term elemental is defined as a primary or basic feature from which all other structures are compounded, the basic or essential constituent of something that is considered to be fundamental, the basic part of a whole, an example being the elemental root of a fundamental essence or primordial substance. The term essential is defined as the intrinsic, fundamental nature of something basic or inherent, a basic, indispensable, or necessary element belonging to the essence of a thing, something that is absolutely necessary or extremely important. The term fundamental is defined as an original or primary source which forms a necessary base or core of central importance, a central or primary rule or principle upon which something is based, the basic, underlying, or essential part of a foundation or basis. The term foundational is defined as an underlying basis or principle, forming or serving as a base or foundation, forming the base from which everything else develops. Understand that the terms elemental, essential, fundamental, and foundational are interrelated and interchangeable and do not specifically apply to a particular housing or building block, but rather what is being demonstrated, emphasized, and communicated within the field is that this body of terms describes the coexistent necessity of an inherent nature. In the acoustic alchemy of alchemical bonds, it is the structure of time in its building blocks of creation and the structure of matter in its quintessential building blocks of life that are closely intertwined with the structure of DNA and its chemical base of building blocks. Similar to the building blocks of creation, the basic elements that comprise DNA are 5 atoms, that being carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, and hydrogen. The 4 chemical bases that are contained within a DNA molecule can be compared to the fourfold nature of the elemental, essential, fundamental, and foundational structure that comprises the quintessential building blocks of life. With that said, we will now refer to the definition for DNA. The term DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid and is defined as a molecule that contains the genetic code unique to every individual. This genetic code is hereditary, meaning that the code passes from parent to child, being passed down from generation to generation within families. DNA is made up of two linked strands that wind around each other, resembling a ladder, which can be likened unto Jacob's ladder, the spiraling DNA stairway to heaven, or the spiraling DNA staircase or stair encasement to heaven. At this time, we will return to the field, where we will read the definition for DNA as we apply the animation of its meaning within the field. The term DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid and is defined as a molecule that contains the genetic code unique to every individual. This genetic code is hereditary, meaning that the code passes from parent to child, being passed down from generation to generation within families. DNA is made up of two linked strands that wind around each other, resembling a ladder, which can be likened unto Jacob's ladder, the spiraling DNA stairway to heaven, or the spiraling DNA staircase or stair encasement to heaven. From the perspective of science, chemistry, and biology, the vertical horizon in its structure of time can be seen or viewed as a DNA time capsule or DNA time encapsule of encasement. At this time, we will refer to the definition for DNA time encapsule of encasement. The term DNA time encapsule of encasement is defined as a container which houses encoded message of instruction, directive, or command, a historical repository of recorded and documented activity, a historical cache of information and data collection, a historical archive containing the frame-by-frame accounting of free will data capture. With that said, let us now return to the field where we will read the definition for the term DNA time encapsule of encasement and apply the animated definition of its meaning within the field. In so doing, pay very close attention to each definition as it is attributed to a specific housing. The term DNA time encapsule of encasement is defined as a historical archive containing the frame-by-frame accounting of free will data capture, a historical repository of recorded and documented activity, a historical cache of information and data collection, a container which houses encoded message of instruction, directive, or command. In other words, there exists a strand of DNA which contains a timeless message in an alchemical bottle. And finally, if you will recall what we learned previously in Part 4, where in the macro and minor division of the field of the plane, I stated the following. By way of program directive, each individual sphere within the field of the plane performs a specific function of operation, and, as a group, each series of 3 spheres performs integrated functions related to the processing and accumulation of data forms. This activity on the part of each series of 3 spheres is specifically related to their individual housings of designation. That is to say, for example, that the operational function and processing activity that is accomplished within housing number 1 is unique and distinct from the operational function and processing activity that is accomplished within housing number 2, etc., and so on, and so it is for each individual housing. In this section of Part 6, I will be introducing you to the crowned magi, who are also referred to as the Ascended Masters of Time. But before we begin, let's take a look at the commonly accepted history, definitions, and meaning for the terms magi and ascended master. The term magi is defined as the 3 wise men, or the 3 kings from the east, who were guided to Bethlehem and the site of the nativity by a star in order to pay homage to the newborn baby or child king Jesus. A class of Zoroastrian priests known as wise men in ancient Media and Persia that possessed supernatural powers. A priesthood of astrologers or sorcerers who were believed to possess the power of magic and had expertise in interpreting the influence of the stars, the moon, and planets on human affairs. The plural form of the term magi is magus, which means magician in Latin. The term ascended master is defined as a human being who has taken the 6th initiation, also referred to as ascension, and is thereby believed to be capable of dwelling in the 6th dimension. A spiritually enlightened being who in a past incarnation was an ordinary human, but has undergone a series of spiritual transformations that are referred to as initiations. An enlightened human who has attained physical immortality by transforming their physical body into a more refined, luminous, subtle material. One who has achieved liberation from a dense, lower vibrational physical body to a higher vibrational light body. One who is no longer bound within the cycle of reincarnation, having evolved unto higher realms of existence. Now that we're familiar with the terms magi and ascended master, let's move forward with a brief review of concepts that we have learned thus far. If you will recall from Part 4, we accomplished the micro and minor division of the field of the plane and divided the field of the plane into 6 equal sections. In so doing, we created 4 separate areas of division which contain 3 spheres each, 1 separate area of division that contains 3 numbers, and finally, 1 separate area of division that consists of 3 elements. We further defined each area of division by scaling the plane and sequentially attributing a number to each section. This series of numbers is referred to as the housing number. As housings 1 through 4 contain 3 spheres each, we scaled the plane once again and attributed the number of spheres to their separate areas of division. Next, housing number 5 does not contain a series of 3 spheres, but instead contains a series of 3 numbers. As such, we accounted for this series of 3 numbers by counting the total numbers present within the housing and attributed number 3 to this area of division. And finally, housing number 6 contains neither a series of spheres or numbers, but rather it is the 2 wings and the tail of the sun god that we counted in their number as the 3 elements contained within this area of division. We accounted for these elements by attributing the number 3 to this housing. This series of numbers that is used to identify the number of spheres, series of numbers, or elements that are contained within each housing is referred to as the number of spheres. Next, we scaled the field of the plane once again and combined the housing number with the number of spheres, series of numbers, or elements for each area of division in order to arrive at the station number or the station of housing. And lastly, we apply the divine principles of numerology within the field of the plane in order to arrive at the scale number for each housing. By adding the housing number plus the number of spheres together, or by adding the two numbers that define the station number together, we arrived at a total sum that results in the scale number. Having determined the housing number, the number of spheres, the station or station of housing, and the scale number, we proceeded to encase and encapsulate the orbital plane of the spheres in order to establish a firm foundation of a vertical horizon which gives form and structure to time itself. The structure that resulted from the encasement and encapsulation of housings 1 through 5 within the orbital plane of the spheres is referred to as the building blocks of creation. Having completed our review of concepts related to the structure of time, we will now go to BibleGateway.com, where we will read biblical scripture related to the parable of the householder. From the King James Version of the Holy Bible, the book of Matthew, chapter 21, verse 33, it states, "Hear another parable. There was a certain householder which planted a vineyard, and hedged it round about, and digged a winepress in it, and built a tower, and let it out to husbandmen, and went into a far country." Let us now return to the field and apply the animated meaning of the parable of the householder within the field. From the King James Version of the Holy Bible, the book of Matthew, chapter 21, verse 33, it states, "Hear another parable. There was a certain householder which planted a vineyard, and hedged it round about, and digged a winepress in it, and built a tower, and let it out to husbandmen, and went into a far country." From the perspective of time, timing, and the cycles of time, the tower spoken of in the parable of the householder is representative of the vertical horizon in its structure of time. As such, the structure of time in its building blocks of creation is also referred to as the watchtower clock of Father Time. Having viewed this animation of configuration within the field, you may have noticed a slightly different approach related to the build-out and construction of the vertical horizon. This variation or difference in approach will be addressed in part 7 of this video series. If you will recall, it was in the beginning of this section that we read definitions for the terms Magi and Ascended Master. Having done so, most viewers of this presentation will associate or attribute those definitions to the men who appear on either side of the tree of life within the petroglyph before us. This assumption is reinforced by the fact that there are 4 letters within the field, that being the letters M, A, J, and I, that appear to be associated with or attributed to each man present within the petroglyph. However, as the 4 letters combined do indeed result in the word Magi, spelled M-A-J-I, which is pronounced similarly to the word Magi, spelled M-A-G-I, there exists a difference in both the spelling and meaning of the word Magi as it relates to the Ascended Masters and the law of time. So now the question becomes, what does the term Magi, spelled M-A-J-I, mean? It means that the Watchtower clock of Father Time is composed of 4 individual clocks that are configured within the first 4 stations or stations of housing within the structure of time, meaning that the numbers 1 through 12, which appear within and around the circumference of a circular clock, are instead, in this instance, lain forth along the incremental rise of the vertical plane of scale and serve the same purpose with regard to time, timing, and the cycles of time. As it relates to time, timing, and the cycles of time, there are 3 major cycles within the structure of time. The first cycle, referred to as the intermediate cycle of the Magi, or the intermediate cycle of the eras, is defined by stations 13, 23, and 33, which comprise the first 9 spheres that encircle the vertical plane of scale. Referred to as the 9 inner spheres, the intermediate cycle of the Magi begins with sphere number 1 and ends with sphere number 9 in the completion of its cycle. The second cycle, referred to as the grand cycle or the grand cycle of the ages, is defined by station 43 and the numbers 13 and 14 of station 53, which comprise the 3 spheres and set of numbers that they contain. Referred to as the 5 outer spheres, the grand cycle begins with sphere number 10 and ends with the number 14 in the completion of its cycle. This underlying foundation for the cycles of time is referred to as the rhythm of life. With that said, the time has come for me to introduce you to the crowned Magi, who are the ascended masters of time. The first Magi is configured within station number 13 and is referred to as the initiate clock or the ancillary clock. The second Magi is configured within station number 23 and is referred to as the journeyman clock or the auxiliary clock. The third Magi is configured within station number 33 and is referred to as the apprentice clock or the secondary clock. The fourth Magi is configured within station number 43 and is referred to as the master clock or the primary clock. And lastly, it is station number 53 that is referred to as the crown. Stacked one atop the other in their building blocks of creation, there is an ascendancy of progression through each clock within the Watchtower clock of Father Time. That is to say that, when the initiate clock ends its cycle of timing, the journeyman clock commences its cycle. When the cycle of timing for the journeyman clock is complete, the apprentice clock begins its cycle. When the cycle of timing for the apprentice clock is complete, the internal processes of timing related to the intermediate cycle of the Magi, or the intermediate cycle of the eras, as it is defined by the 9 inner spheres, is also complete, thus signaling the master clock and the 5 outer spheres to commence with processes related to the grand cycle or the grand cycle of the ages. When the master clock completes its cycle of timing, its processes are then received within station number 53, where it is accumulated and verified. Once the process for the grand cycle of the ages has been authenticated, the intermediate cycle of the Magi, in their series of 4 clocks, receives its crown, or is crowned, having completed their internal processes of magic, spelled with the letter J versus the letter G. This internal process of timing, in its ascendancy of progression through each clock within the watchtower clock of Father Time is why the Magi, spelled M-A-J-I, are referred to as the Ascended Masters of Time. At this time, we will briefly revisit the definitions and meanings for the terms Magi, spelled M-A-G-I, and Ascended Master that we read about in the beginning of this section and compare their definitions and meanings to the field. The term Magi is defined as the three wise men or the three kings from the east who were guided to Bethlehem and the site of the nativity by a star in order to pay homage to the newborn baby or child king Jesus. A class of Zoroastrian priests known as wise men in ancient Media and Persia that possessed supernatural powers. A priesthood of astrologers or sorcerers who were believed to possess the power of magic and had expertise in interpreting the influence of the stars, the moon, and planets on human affairs. The plural form of the term magi is magus, which means magician in Latin. The term ascended master is defined as a human being who has taken the sixth initiation, also referred to as ascension, and is thereby believed to be capable of dwelling in the sixth dimension. A spiritually enlightened being who in a past incarnation was an ordinary human, but has undergone a series of spiritual transformations that are referred to as initiations. An enlightened human who has attained physical immortality by transforming their physical body into a more refined, luminous, subtle material. One who has achieved liberation from a dense, lower vibrational physical body to a higher vibrational light body. One who is no longer bound within the cycle of reincarnation, having evolved unto higher realms of existence. Now that we're familiar with the terms Magi and Ascended Master, let's move forward with a brief review of concepts that we have learned thus far. Having revisited the definitions and meanings for the terms Magi, spelled M-A-G-I, and Ascended Master, we can make the comparison between the commonly accepted definitions and meanings for these terms to what we have learned so far about the Magi, spelled M-A-J-I, as the Ascended Masters of Time. As it relates to the processing activities related to the Magi and the cycles of time, we will now refer to a previous section in Part 6 and briefly review what we learned about the functions of operation that are attributed to each station of housing. The term DNA time and capsule of encasement is defined as a historical archive containing the frame-by-frame accounting of free will data capture. A historical repository of recorded and documented activity. A historical cache of information and data collection. A container which houses encoded message of instruction, directive, or command. In other words, there exists a strand of DNA which contains a timeless message in an alchemical bottle. And finally, if you will recall what we learned previously in Part 4, where in the macro and minor division of the field of the plane, I stated the following. By way of program directive, each individual sphere within the field of the plane performs a specific function of operation, and as a group, each series of 3 spheres performs integrated functions related to the processing and accumulation of data forms. This activity on the part of each series of 3 spheres is specifically related to their individual housings of designation. That is to say, for example, that the operational function and processing activity that is accomplished within housing number 1 is unique and distinct from the operational function and processing activity that is accomplished within housing number 2, etc., and so on, and so it is for each individual housing. Upon 5 vertical housings, and within 6 concentric circles, ye art bound by the law of time. No more time is a place. Well, that's it for this video. Please be sure to like, share, subscribe, and don't forget to hit the notification bell to be notified when we post new videos. Until next time.